read about this organization, Witness for Peace, in Time magazine, going down to Nicaragua. Well, you know, Nicaragua was our enemy. We were at war, the Contra War. And I thought, oh my gosh, it was started by a Presbyterian, a non-Presbyterian, and a Catholic. And I just had this calling. My first husband and I had split up, and my life was just really crazy, gone. But I read that article, and I thought, these people are going down to Witness for Peace. Because I had read enough about the Contra War to know that our part in it was mainstay and extremely, if you don't mind the word, evil. It was incredible to me that this group would be taking us up into the war zone. That's what they did. So I applied and went up, way up into the war zone. And of course, back then, the last 6 hours of the road on our road up there were dirt roads. But I will never forget being in El Qua in 1985, hearing the guns go off, and our tax dollars killing people that just wanted to have a better life. They'd gotten rid of the dictator that we supported for decades and decades and decades. But of course, we love controlling resources. I don't know if you ever heard John Foster Dulles' quote, but what did he say? Secretary of State, we are 6% of the world's population, using about 40% of the world's resources. And our foreign policy is based on maintaining our standard of living. So, you know, I was feeling horrible even as a fairly young person in college, you know, supporting all the dictators. So when I read about Witness for Peace, I thought, I'm going. And I was so glad that I did. As I may have mentioned, it was started by a Presbyterian and by a Catholic, and they wanted us to see for ourselves what our tax dollars were doing. And not just go for a little visit, but to get up into the war zone. And then the next year, my husband went. We were not a couple then, in fact, I never will forget. We had been friends from a distance and going to the Coalition for Justice meetings, which was formed in Blacksburg to fight the Contra War. And I went and talked to the group about it, and then he came over and wanted to know about it, so he went the next year. And then the third year, another friend, Dale Wimberly, went, and fourth year, Nick Jones went. Well, Nick Jones came back, and we had a lot of friends on our town council. And so he established a sister city with San Jose de Bocay. And to this day, that was 1960. To this day, Blacksburg and San Jose de Bocay have a very strong relationship. In fact, we all went this very last January. My husband led it for years, but two professors at Tech have taken it over, and I hope it will continue. But Witness for Peace is what it's about. We are called to witness for peace in the nation, and then come back and share with our communities and our legislators trying to change foreign policy, which I'm very, very grateful for. And when I got the call to come, I was excited, and we were going to get a person from our national office here, and then unfortunately he couldn't come. And so when Gary asked me, I said, well, I've got to do it because they just named me to the national board. So I appreciate being with you all tonight. Many of you may know that there are no longer limits on how much Cuban-made goods can come into the country. That's been a big switch with our President Obama. That the U.S. has abstained from voting during UN votes condemning Cuba embargo after having voted no for 25 years. Commercial flights to Cuba have started again, and we can go down as well. And a really dear friend of mine went a couple of years ago, which was really exciting. Cuba embargo is still there, of course. Commercial flights to Cuba have been resumed, easing of restrictions on U.S. computers in both countries, so we can telecommunicate back and forth together, and reopening of embassies in both countries. Obama has sent a group of top disease scientists to Cuba to aid in the study and combat of Zika and other tropical diseases. Another step toward making our countries simpatico again. What really got me about our position on Cuba over the years was, Cuba as well as Nicaragua, really got me about Nicaragua. Going back to Nicaragua and the Contra War, during that Sandinista regime, did you know there were 2 Catholic priests in the government? In that communist government? The Minister of Culture was a priest, and the Minister of Education was a priest. And we kept getting all this nonsense over our media. Well, it was interesting. During the Vietnam War, my first husband preached against it in 1968. There was a colonel in the congregation, and he said to Bob after the service, I've just come back from Vietnam and I need to talk to you about your sermon. So Bob came home and said, well, we may not have a job. We may be out of here. Said, honey, other than your Selma, because he went to march with Dr. King in 1965, I said, other than your Selma sermon, your Vietnam sermon was the best. So he says, for the colonel, and the colonel says, I'd like to know where you got your information about the Vietnam War. And Bob said, Ramparts and other alternative press. Y'all remember Ramparts? Yeah. Oh yeah. He said, well, everything you said was correct. And I knew you didn't get it from the mainline press. And he cried for 2 hours. So here we are in the Nicaragua with the war. Now then with Cuba, And so I'm very proud of Witness for Peace. First of all, for taking us down to Nicaragua and now to Cuba. And so I've given you pass out. And I hope everybody got one. If you didn't, please do so. But Witness for Peace has a great logo. I love it. They can cut all of the flowers, but they cannot stop the spring from coming. That's a quote from Pablo Neruda. And I just love that quote. It's on the first page that I have here for Witness for Peace. They can cut all the flowers. Yes, we can do that with our policies. But they cannot stop the spring from coming. Isn't that great? I just love that.
And the sun came up on Wednesday after the elections on Tuesday. It still came up.
Yes, sir. Here's hope. We've got to live in hope. We've got to live in hope. I know that. I know that. But if you go to the Witness for Peace site, there are always actions that we can take and do. And I just wanted you to see that they do have a site. And now we will talk about their delegations to Cuba. They were about the first group, of course, we were to go to Cuba. And there are several of them. And it's interesting, on the second handout that I gave you, it just gives you a little bit about how we got involved with Cuba. Witness for Peace is happy to announce that we have been granted a renewal of our people-to-people license for travel to Cuba. Witness for Peace is now able to organize delegations that will offer a full-time schedule. And then they get a 2-year license from the Office of Foreign Assets Control. I mean, can you imagine all this that we went through? It's amazing. And then on the next page is the beginning of Witness for Peace tours. They have different emphases, and that's why I wanted you each to have one. The first one is in January 8th to January 17th. And the deadline to sign up is December 8th of this year. And it is going to, under participants in this delegation will, I think this is really, of course it would be one in a way, but now, I don't know, we'll see. Examine Cuban national priorities such as universal education and health care. Visit schools, museums, cultural and historical sites. Discuss with Cubans the effects of recent changes in U.S. and Cuban relations, including the long-standing U.S. embargo on Cuba. And then, of course, do the wonderful tourist things. But this is what I loved about Witness for Peace. When I went in 1985, we actually talked to U.S. Embassy people after our tour. It was amazing. And they are not only interested in, touring, but they're interested in our understanding and perceiving what is really going on there and how our policy affects it or doesn't, and how our policy is affected. I just wanted to be sure that you got to see that. And then the next one is March 3rd through 12th. And they're more oriented toward some different aspects, which I think is cool. The literacy campaign that made Cuba a UN designated illiteracy-free zone. Don't we wish we could be that? A little of my history is I worked in inner city Chicago in 1958. Where the poor kids, they could hardly speak. They were black families that had come up from the South after World War II. And the black mom, they were just wigged out. They didn't care about the kids. They didn't get them to places on time. It was so tragic to me. Then I moved to Charlottesville in 1965, and Virginia had no public kindergartens. Did y'all know that? Remember the day? Oh my God. I could not believe it. I went to kindergarten in 1943 in upstate New York. And so everybody wanted to know where our children were going to the proper private kindergarten, or private preschool, to get into the proper private kindergarten. That's how it was in Virginia, at least in Charlottesville and the more eastern part of it. So I said, what about the black kids? My husband was a minister. These were all of our church people asking where my children were going to be going to the proper private preschool to get the proper private kindergarten. Oh my Lord. So I said, well, what about the black kids? The poor kids. And so a black lady and I started probably the first desegregated school in the South, called the Church Women's Preschool Experience. And we picked the kids up. And there I saw the black moms having their kids ready, but the poor white moms not. Poverty is still an issue in this nation. The percentage of our poor not reading at grade level is tragic. And I work at a pre-K class in Blacksburg, and I said, how many of these kids do you think are fetally addicted? And she said 8 out of 18. That's a whole other issue to deal with. But anyway, literacy campaign that made Cuba a UN designated illiteracy-free zone. We don't hear about this. What could we do to help our situation here with our, especially low-income kids that are still not reading at grade level? And you know how we project prison population in the U.S.? Anybody know?
Reading ability.
At what grade?
Second or third?
Third.
Yeah.
The end of 3rd grade, yes ma'am. Yep. Changing role of women. Women just came alive after the revolution in Cuba. They're very strong. Of course, education. They always, Witness for Peace is always interested in educational programs. And talking about the embargo, of course, that's always been a real concern of ours. And it's incredible. And then you can read the rest here, but I love the Martin Luther King Center, named for Dr. King, vibrant hub for community education and faith, and then ecology, celebrating International Women's Day. So Witness for Peace is there on the ground, helping those that go with us to really experience life in the community and in the nation. And then on March 24th to April 2nd is a whole nother kind of tour dealing mainly with the arts, which I find fascinating. Because back in my day when I was involved with Witness for Peace, I don't think we'd ever had a delegation oriented that way. But I think it's really exciting that you're not only going to visit museums and all, but meet with performing arts students and professional artists and find out about the importance of the Santeria and Afro-Cuban heritage of Cuba. It's such a wonderful mixture. And of course, we're a mixture. I love it. My dad, thank God, his parents, Jews, came from Krakow, Poland, or he would have been dead. And Mother's dad spoke up against the communists. He wouldn't join them. He was all for public, he was in the army, Tsar's army, and he would speak up for education for all, housing for all, jobs for all, back under the old era. And the communists came and wanted him to join him. And he said, I'm sorry, I believe in everything you believe in, except I don't like your tactics. So thank God he ran. They burned down his hay bales, beat him up, and he came on over thinking he was going to Argentina, but came here. Then my mom would go through the village and say, is that my daddy? Is that my daddy? So Grandma sold the big farm. So there were two, of course, businesses in the village, the convenience store and the liquor store, and they had the convenience store. But all the little villages, it's still like that when I was there in '88 anyway. Convenience store and the liquor store. But she worked the sugar beets fields and came over. So, I mean, to me, it's just such an important experience for us to realize, I mean, our nation was, I don't want to go there, but this is, I think, for people who are interested in the arts, that's an amazing possibility to go, to see with your own eyes, hear with your own ears again. And in April, I love this one, of course, to learn what normalization of relations between the U.S. and Cuba means to the island and the people itself. Plan to meet and learn from Cubans about Cuba's political, social, and economic history, the impact again of the embargo, Cuba's national priorities such as universal health care, of course, education for all, sustainable agriculture, and the impact of changing relations and global climate change again. But I just think, I mean, Witness for Peace is touching on very basic issues, very crucial issues to the Cuban people and also to us in our relationship to Cuba. And I don't know if any of you have ever been on a Witness for Peace tournament, but it's very comprehensive. I mean, you don't just sign up and go. And this is the Witness for Peace travel program application that's on their website. And you can see, first page is pretty okay. But they wanted to know, how did you hear about us? And then help in emergency, of course. But the one I really love is, they ask for your language skills. You know, they really are hoping that we can speak Spanish and be part of the dialogue. But of course, there are wonderful interpreters. You don't have to worry if you don't speak Spanish. I took it in high school. My daddy said, I said, Daddy, what language should I take? This is in the 50s. Spanish is the language of our future. So people that can speak it, but I still can't. I took it, but I can get along when I traveled Nicaragua by myself one year toward the end of a program. I could make it all right. But anyway, we have wonderful interpreters. We really have excellent interpreters. And then they want to know, how did you hear about Witness for Peace? Do you have experience with human rights, social justice, environmental or other organizations that are committed to social change? I mean, how many groups ask that kind of question? I mean, I really think it's a very special, hands-on, caring, kind of demanding group in a way, you know? And then, why do you want to go on this delegation? I mean, all the groups I've ever been on, these questions were never asked, so I wanted you to see this and be impressed with it. Are you willing to adhere to the Witness for Peace policy of nonviolence? I mean, you never know what's going to happen to you on a trip. I mean, some trips over my lifetime, I first went to the Middle East and Europe when I was 16, one knapsack, third class, 3 months. And it was very, very fascinating. And there were times when, you know, because we were not really loved in a lot of the places we went. Went to Greece and gave back after the war to a village outside of Salonika, went over to Istanbul, down to Athens, Cairo, Alexandria, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Israel. We're in the first Palestinian refugee camps, then up through Europe. I mean, it was quite a trip, but there were times that you, and I'm sure all of you who've traveled have had these experiences, but Witness for Peace wants us to be peace, 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 all the way, Witness for Peace. And then it's just a very good overall questionnaire, I think, of when you're applying, so I didn't want you to be caught off guard if you wanted to go and saw that. But it is a really amazing, hands-on, with the people, listening and learning, and a lot of fun as well. And the fact that, well, I just love the name, Acción Permanente por la Paz, Witness for Peace. And the fact that we were one of the first organizations to go into Cuba makes me very proud to be on the national board. I don't know if there's anything else.
Well, how did Witness for Peace start? I mean, I just knew that they were around in the 80s.
Oh, yeah, okay. There was a Catholic nun, Gail Ferris, who was working in El Salvador at the time. And she started hearing about the war. And then there were some Presbyterians down in the area as well as from Guatemala. So Catholics and Presbyterians got together and felt that it was very important, especially for people of faith at the time, to go down and see for ourselves what our tax dollars were doing. Because they knew it was a totally uncalled for war.
This is back in the 80s?
Yes, oh yeah, 80, it started in, I think in 83. Then I went in 85, and Clark went in 86, and two others. Dale Wimberly, some of you may know Dale, sociology professor at Tech. And then Nick Jones went. And fortunately, we had some very nice people on our town council that were empathetic with us. We started Coalition for Justice meetings every Monday, once a month on Mondays, and a couple of the people on town council. Woody Leach, some of you may remember Woody Leach, Presbyterian minister, very active in the civil rights movement and picked up immediately on this war. So he was on town council as well as a couple of others, and we became the sister city. But it got started, I believe it was 83, with Gail Ferris out of North Carolina.
What are the projects that you guys do when you go in? Is it just visits, or?
It is mainly learning. Now, our sister city, when we go now, that was established from a Witness for Peace group, we do hands-on. This last January, we put little seedlings in a plastic bag to be planted, and we did over 1,000 to reforest the trees. But Witness for Peace is primarily a learning, going and talking to people in power, talking with people who have been affected by the programs, especially by our policy. And it's more of a learning directly than a hands-on. I really liked that about Witness when we went to Nicaragua, because we were talking with government officials and educators and religious leaders, just really trying to find out for ourselves what was going on so we could come back and share. That's part of your challenge, is to come back and share with the community. I talked at Rotary clubs and Kiwanis clubs and church groups and the Jewish community and faith groups. If your job is to go learn and then come back and share. Good question.
Could you give a summary, like a brief summary of what the war in Nicaragua was about, what the sides were, why the U.S. took the side it did?
Oh,
Like, assume I don't know anything. I'm ignorant.
he's an SOB, but he's our SOB. That was John Foster Dulles again. And pretty much we controlled Latin America so that we could control the resources. Well, the Contras rose up against us, and the Contra War was started. And they were of the people, by the people, for the people, wanting Nicaragua to rule itself. Not that the leadership today is perhaps what we would like to have. It's pretty much going back a lot. But at the time, it was an amazing revolution. But it was a war. And it was trying to get the people that we controlled. I forgot, gosh, I can't remember that guy's name now, can you?
Who's that?
In Nicaragua, the fellow that we were kicking out.
Somoza?
Was it Somoza? Yeah, it was Somoza. And so, Witness for Peace wanted us to go down and see for ourselves what this revolution against the dictator Somoza, our guy, was about. And took you up into the war zone to see for yourself what was actually happening. And so, thank goodness, there's not a war going on in Cuba, but Witness for Peace goes to many, many other countries as well. You can get on their website and see, we take people to many, many, many Latin American countries now.
What wasn't a big part of Witness for Peace starting in Nicaragua, my understanding was that the Contras were targeting civilians.
Yes,
They were targeting clinics, churches, schools, and just individual civilians. It was a terror war, which we of course put together out of Honduras. And so the initial purpose was to go down and to be with civilians who are caught at the crossfire, just like in Colombia with the hopefully end of a 50-year war. Going down and being with communities which were caught in the crossfire, especially between the FARC and the militias in Colombia.
yeah.
So that was the initial idea.
To take us up into the war zones,
Yeah.
to see for ourselves what our tax dollars were doing.
Right. And we were talking a little bit earlier that Pastors for Peace, since they're some of us are sort of starting to talk about Pastors for Peace coming next year here to Roanoke.
Super.
And Lucius Walker, who founded Pastors for Peace, he was a minister, I don't know what tradition, maybe in New York. But anyhow, he was in Nicaragua in the early 80s with civilians, and they were on they were crossing a river or a small lake or something, and they came under fire from the Contras, and he was wounded in that exchange. Well, there was no exchange, they were just being targeted as civilians. And that's what inspired him to start Pastors for Peace from the Contra War. And the Contra War, which we put together with primarily with Nicaraguans who were not supportive of, they were Somoza people, but this was after the Sandinistas took over with Ortega and the two priests and so on in his government. But Honduras was the staging area for that war against Nicaragua, just like Honduras was the staging area for Guatemala when we invaded Guatemala in the early 80s to get rid of Guzman, a democratically elected president who wanted a very reform. But anyhow, that's how my understanding. That was a big part of Witness for Peace started.
Do y'all remember Benjamin Linder at all,
Mm-hmm.
when he was killed?
He's in hydrology.
Yes, he was a
Hydrology,
28-year-old engineer from Portland, Oregon,
Mhm.
and he had brought electricity to the village that I went with Witness for Peace, to El Pois, and then he moved on up the mountain to our village, San Jose de Bucay, and he was working to bring electricity there, building the dam, getting them to build the dam. And as he was looking over the water that they were considering damming with a Nicaraguan buddy, we killed him with our money, with our tax dollars, with our money. The Contras killed Ben, 28-year-old engineer from Portland, just trying to bring electricity to a village. And Clark was actually, my husband was actually there when Ben was killed and went to the memorial gathering in his honor. But the people just adore him. In our village to this day, I mean, they have a celebration. He was a clown as well. The kids loved him, and they always have a parade down the street every year for Ben Linder. But you might want to read about him and the family that started. I mean, many of us were not complacent over the Contra War. And so today, I'm really excited that Witness for Peace is continuing. It has branched out into so many different ways, Colombia and throughout Central America and the Caribbean.
Question on
Yes.
for the delegations to Cuba, like the one in March,
Uh-huh.
is that Do you know, is that going to be totally in Havana, or do they go out to the provinces also?
You know, that's a really good question, but the way that it's reading makes you look as though it might just be in Havana.
It sounds that way.
Yes, yeah.
The Martin Luther King Center is, the year that I went with Pastors for Peace down there, that's where we stayed,
Yeah,
for our 4 days in Havana.
isn't that
But then
awesome?
we went out to the provinces also, but yeah, that's quite a
Yeah.
place.
I hear you.
Okay,
But then
so
you
you're
can get
thinking-
on their website too and ask that
Okay.
kind of a question, but
Yeah.
most of the time, we do go city and town and village,
Okay,
but it just depends on the purpose of the delegation. But that's a good question.
mhm.
Because I think just going to the cities is not as meaningful as experiencing third world villages. How many of you have been on trips like that? Have you been on a
Yeah,
trip
Cuba.
to, well, not just to Cuba, but any third world country where you get up and see the real poverty, like getting into our inner cities or, you know, our poor in Southwest Virginia.
I've been to India.
Oh, then you know very well.
To where?
Yeah,
India.
Mhm.
You got outside of the cities as well, yeah. What were you doing?
Oh, I took students from Roanoke College,
Super.
and we had, we got to visit several cities and also some small villages.
And in the villages, what would you do? Just,
Well, once we got to visit a school that was really interesting. It was there's a series of schools named for Kasturbai Gandhi, Gandhi's wife, and it's the Kasturbai Gandhi Trust that founded these schools. And we got to go to one of those schools, and it's a wonderful series of schools to help poor children.
awesome, awesome, awesome. Yeah, I really like the delegations that go and have hands-on, and at least you see more than just the sights. You know.
I had an occasion to go to Haiti, and one of the members of our meeting, Sue Williams,
Yeah.
Sue Williams and her husband Steve had volunteered for an orphanage program there, and it was just, my daughter was a high school junior, and I went, and we had a wonderful experience. I mean, the people were there, but we never saw poverty like that in terms of kids
Amen.
washing themselves in the runoff from
Yeah.
people that had water. On top of the mountain would either turn off and flush the toilet or whatever, but turn water, and the kids, everybody would run and wash in the water.
Because the wealthy lived up on the mountain.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
wealthy
then,
lived
yeah,
up.
exactly.
Yeah, so Port-au-Prince is where we were,
Mhm.
and the shacks and the things, and
And how did that affect your
oh,
daughter?
in a good way. Yeah,
Yeah.
to this day, she knows what poverty is. You know,
Yeah. Yeah,
she's a modern woman, but
she's blessed.
But we had a good opportunity just to show you how fathers, if you go and having a good time with Sue, and she meets a guy, some American or somebody, and where is she? She's out with him. You know,
Wandering around.
17, and sitting, wait a minute, it's all chickens crowing and stuff like that. But everything worked out. She came home, it was good.
You're great. I mean, I couldn't, looking back, it's amazing. My father in 1954 allowed me, a 16-year-old, to go for 3 months.
Yes.
One knapsack, third class, Europe and the Middle East.
Yes.
You're a good daddy. That's
Yeah.
great, man.
Right.
No, I think the younger people can have this experience of not just a tour, but, you know, just experiencing the realities of our brothers and sisters around the world. I think the better it is for them, for their communities, and for our nation, really.
One other comment on poverty.
Yes.
It's an island, and the children don't know how to swim. In other words, you'd say, it's an island, but no one taught anybody, and so there's drowning all the time. The kids play in the water, and but it's a poverty of something you take for granted. Somebody showed you or helped somebody to swim. You don't.
Yes.
That's the point. It's so poor not to. I mean, they want to go in the water, but they don't know how to swim.
Yeah.
So it was
Yeah,
in other words, it's still poor. I mean, you see the hurricanes,
it's
and
horrible.
it's the same. It's sort of the same.
Isn't it?
The
Ralph?
poverty, just everything hits them, and then
I think Haiti is the poorest.
oh yes, yeah.
And then,
Haiti is connected to the Dominican Republic,
yes.
and nobody knows that. We have all
Right.
kinds of luxury tours and things go to the Dominican Republic. Everybody has drinks and wild times, and it's half of the island of Haiti. I think it was Hispaniola or something, but Haiti is at the poor part, and so it's just a kind of, you know, when you
Yeah.
think of the difference in.
Yeah, it's the poorest
Yeah.
country in our hemisphere. It's so
Dominican Republic
tragic.
isn't that wealthy itself. Dominican Republic isn't that wealthy itself, really.
Say it a little louder.
Dominican Republic is not wealthy.
So it's
No,
not
no,
gonna be
no,
No, they have the resorts on the
Yeah, I was
coast,
gonna
but
say,
yeah, you go inland.
compared
Oh,
it's not
yeah,
all-
no, compared to Haiti.
And how
Compared to
long,
Haiti.
how long ago?
How many tours go to Haiti?
Yeah.
They don't know, you know, you don't go get off the boat.
Have you been,
my
church-
have you been to,
I haven't been, my church has a gentleman
Yeah.
from Mission, but I mean,
Oh, it is.
it's
Oh,
very,
it's poor too, I'm not
Extreme
quite
poor.
in it.
And it's
Extremely
like,
poor
but it's
is
like our nation
parts of
too,
the
with our
country.
really, really poor and then our really, really wealthy. I mean, we don't discuss this at all, and, but I just want to know, if anybody have any other questions about Witness for
What's
Peace?
the situation in Nicaragua like nowadays?
There's education for all, which is awesome, and women's equality, of course, is fantastic. I mean, that was one of the things of the revolution. The women gained power, and they still have it. There's still a lot of poverty out in the cities, you know, the really, really, like we have in our cities. Only I think theirs is worse, and they're very wealthy, as we do. The people in the village, at least in our sister city, are really doing extremely well. I'm just so happy for them. They got their electricity thanks to Ben Linder. So there's education, very good schools. In fact, 26 years ago when Clark and I got married, their school along the river had flooded, and so we raised money at that time. And we said, we don't need anything, please give money to our sister city school. Well, now they've got 3 schools, the elementary and the middle and the high schools. And it's really fabulous. And you know, when we first went there, of course, there were no schools there. And the community pulls together really interestingly well, because they care about their kids. I think that's the key. And the leadership, especially the women leadership in that village. And then there's a gentleman too that is amazing. He is in charge of one of the power plants there and for electricity, and started working with Ben Linder when he was here. And our sister city is, I think, really, the streets are still not paved. The flowers are beautiful. And they're really committed to their children and the education of their kids, which I find fascinating.
With the oil wars, I guess the peace movement shifted a lot of our attention to the Middle East, so I don't really know.
Yes.
What was the outcome of the Contra War and all that? I mean, was there a peace treaty signed?
The
or-
Sandinistas took over. Yeah, we were kicked out, basically.
The Contras, they're not still active or anything,
No.
are they? Or-
No, there's another party that the remnants of the country are part of. And, but I understand now that the Soviet Union is going to be going into Nicaragua. Have y'all read anything about that? They're going to be having some relationships there.
Well,
And-
yeah, there's a great irony because
Yeah,
Ortega, who was the leader of the Sandinistas, he was the leader of the revolution, and they lost power because they were thrown out of power by an election. Basically the people of Nicaragua were faced endless war with the Contras in the United States or elect a conservative government, which they did. So that was the end of the Sandinistas back when, like in the
80s.
mid-late 80s.
Yeah.
But about 5 years ago, Ortega, who's a very different Ortega, he's not a revolutionary anymore, some corruption, he's back in power now.
and his wife also.
Right, very much so.
what is going on with the canal that the canal that's going in there?
Last I heard, it's not
Yeah.
going.
There was,
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh,
that's the
wow.
last I've heard. Have you heard anything more about it?
No, it's, a big Chinese company was talking about it.
Yeah.
I think they did some planning. but there were so many concerns.
There was concerns about the
environmentally.
hurricane. It was
Yeah.
And the
right on the
indigenous-
hurricane belt.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And
And they were gonna
Roanoke
just
would be-
dismantle indigenous
A
people.
lot of people
Yeah.
were really
I just
rolled
couldn't
up against that
believe that.
plan, because it was gonna environmentally be just so destructive. I mean,
But good question. I mean, as far as we know, it's not going through. Let's pray so. Oh, man. It would just be horrible, not only to the
Maybe.
environment, but to the indigenous people
Involved.
that
I
have
know
been there.
a couple years ago, it was a serious
Yeah,
proposal.
yeah.
And as far as where delegations go today, they go to a lot of places where I'd say it's difficult to go either because of hostility, war, gang violence, or
Yeah, not as much, you know, they go to
antipathy-
Columbia.
antipathy towards Americans
Yeah.
in general, and restrictions. I mean, I'm thinking
Well, you can
a
imagine
place that I could think would be
how,
hard to go to right now would be Gaza, something like that. But, some of the places probably
I do want to
people
go
need
though.
to see are the hardest to get into.
There are groups that are taking people to Gaza. I do want to go before I pass on to the next line. I didn't know if they'd let me into Israel or not, you know, with my history of being very, very overtly anti-Zionist. I'm not anti-Israel, they have a right to exist, but not beyond the 67 border. And if you try to find growth of settlements, current, you can't find it. You cannot find on the internet anything showing settlement growth beyond 2014. And they have pretty much, my people, my dad being Jewish, those Zionists have taken over just about all of Israel. And it is really tragic. But there are groups that take people. In fact, I was at a conference 4 weekends ago about the issue, and we went lobbying Congress about our policy toward the area.
There's a hiking trail through the West Bank, supposedly, that's was built as like an international effort to get people together, but it's kind of hard because
Yeah.
in the West Bank there's no mingling really, and the Israelis are coming in and building settlements, and
What are you going
the Israelis are coming and building
Oh.
settlements, and
Oh,
the Palestinians in the West Bank are.
oh, it's evil.
But there's supposedly a hiking trail that runs through there. And it's
Yes.
supposed to go on the route, all the places where Abraham lived.
Mhm.
I don't know if they'll build it ever into
No, if
Iraq
anyone is
or somewhere
interested
like that. Would that be
in
interesting?
the issues, I mean, it's not our topic of the night, but it has been with me since I was 16 years old in the first Palestinian refugee camps. Sitting under the tent, being told by the Palestinians, as the Jews were coming in to establish Israel, they were told over the radio by the British, leave your homes, you can come back in 48 hours. I heard that with my own ears at the age of 16. And I kept asking speakers on Israel why the British did that. Finally, in the 80s, a rabbi spoke at our church, Blacksburg Presbyterian Church, and I asked him. He said, well, the British thought the Palestinians and Arabs would push the Jews back into the sea and Israel would never be established. Yeah. But you can't even see growth of settlements beyond 2040. They've taken over almost all of the area. What they've done to our half-brothers and sisters is incredible. I mean, I live with lots of pain from different things.
I have to share with you all that on my way here tonight, I was behind a car with an interesting bumper sticker I hadn't seen before.
Oh,
It said, "Free Palestine in the occupation."
ooh, yes.
And I thought, it was a North Carolina car, but nonetheless.
Well, I've got one similar to that.
I hadn't seen it before.
Yeah.
I was thinking,
Yeah. And I'm known as a self-hating Jew. I'm on the list of self-hating Jews. Have you ever heard of that list? Anybody heard of it?
Or self-loathing, that's
Yeah.
what they usually say.
Yeah. Yeah. But you can't even find that list anymore. I haven't been able to find it.
Does anybody know about Trump's response to Cuba? Is he going to shut all down the openings, or?
he's gonna cut a deal. He's gonna-
He hasn't said too much, but he's probably going to slow down the process like Obama has
Yes,
started over the
yeah.
last 2 years, and we'll support Congress in not lifting the embargo, which is a big thing, of
Exactly.
course.
I expect them to shut all that down, actually.
Yeah,
Rather than slow it down, just shut it down.
that's why I think it's important to get down there and go,
Mm.
if you
Well,
can.
we
And
still-
I wanted to tell you, when I went, did I share this with you? I had no money whatsoever, did I tell you that? When I went first time with Witness for Peace in Nicaragua, I had absolutely no money. And I just had this calling after reading that article, and I just asked all my family and friends for help. And I said I would come back and share with you what I experienced. I would speak to the community about it, and which I did, talk to a lot of groups and organizations. And so I think anytime you do a trip like this, do try to get the word out, speak to various groups that would be open. And I think, especially if you know people in Rotary or Kiwanis, that kind of thing, because it was kind of eye-opening to them. Because I was 1980, yeah, I was by then a licensed financial advisor, so it was kind of interesting, the juxtaposition.
Are there delegations that come back from these countries to visit the United States?
I don't know about Cuba, to tell you the truth. I know for some they do,
I wondered if there were groups that came from
back and forth.
Nicaragua or Bolivia or whatever to visit the United States. Like, we go down to visit them.
Yeah, our sister city, we've had people come up to Blacksburg.
Mike and I have been talking about, in touch with Pastors for Peace, and they're wanting to come in April, and primarily to talk up a trip to Cuba in the latter part of July. But they're talking about having some folks from Cuba on this trip around this country in April, which would be interesting.
Super.
Yeah, that's gonna be like a lobbying educational trip.
Mm.
They're gonna do the regular caravan in
Yeah, they're
July,
gonna
I
do
think.
that.
What's
Well,
that?
no, just briefly, the trip in April would be just by car, no buses, no picking up humanitarian aid. And they would be just going around the country, hitting spots like where they were before, because they used to come here quite a bit. And it would be for, just to update and to gather volunteers for a trip to Cuba in the end of July, and then fundraising. Those would be the three purposes. And then the latter part of July, they are going to go down. I don't know if they're even going to go to Havana. They're going to go to the eastern end to see what happened with Hurricane Matthew. Not a work brigade though. And then they're going to go down to Guantanamo and have a vigil protest
Awesome.
at Gitmo.
Yeah, Mike Bentley and Polly Branch,
Yeah.
Bausch are interested in working on that.
Yeah, we're all sort of
Yeah.
touched on it.
Okay.
So anyway, that's that trip.
Yeah. Y'all, thank you so much for inviting me
Yeah.
to hear about Witness for Peace.
I might just add just a little notice here. My wife and I have been looking at Cuban trips, if possible, in the coming year. And the total cost, $1,900 plus airfare, but that's a few hundred. That's quite reasonable for a 9-day
yeah.
trip. If you look at tour companies
Oh,
and so on,
gosh.
it's more like $340 than $5 for one individual.
Yeah, it's much, I've been looking at them too for
Yeah.
quite some time.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
that
I
might-
meant to
this is
mention that.
reasonable.
Witness for Peace is very, very reasonable. They always have been. I mean, we really want the people to go. It's nothing first class about it, let me tell you.
Well, the Martin Luther King Center, people are staying there.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
nice, you have your
yeah.
meals right there.
It's fine,
It's 232 room that when we were there.
yeah.
But 1,900 is quite attractive.
No, they're really good.
Mhm.
Witness is really good. They want everyone to be able to go. And as I say, when I first went, I had no money. So
And
you just tell people you feel called to, or, if you know younger people that would go. I mean, it's wonderful if you can attract and try to find some younger people to go.
and Witness for Peace goes with government license, right?
Oh, of course.
Okay,
Yeah, there's something on the page here that talks
Okay.
about that.
so it's not like Pastors
Here
for
you
Peace
go.
in that regard.
Our 2-year license
Yeah,
from the Office of Foreign Assets Control allows Witness for Peace to take delegations to Cuba under the quote, people to people category.
That's a US license?
yeah.
Yes.
Whereas Pastors for Peace, even the one in July, they always go without a license. It's civil disobedience, so it's different.
Well, it says that this travel category then provides for educational exchanges, when those exchanges promote people-to-people contact. So this is really, of course, Pastor's Feast would be
Yeah,
people-to-people.
Pastor's Feast does the same
Yeah.
thing as this, but they
Mhm.
go without a license.
Yeah.
That's part of their whole.
What does that mean, either to have a license or not to have a license? What does it do
Well,
for the group?
Technically, if you go without a license, it's civil disobedience, one could be prosecuted. But tellingly, the government has never prosecuted pastors for peace because they know if ever got to court, they would lose, because how can they tell you as citizens you can't trouble you know, so, like when we went, basically when we took the humanitarian aid across the border at McAllen, Texas, when we were going down, we were breaking the trade embargo because we had busloads full of stuff. And they would always confiscate, the border would always confiscate a few things, but then they let us go through. Then when we came back, it was the travel ban, and it was sort of funny. When we came back, we spent the last night in Mexico in Veracruz, which is a border city. And the hotel in Veracruz was literally within walking distance of the border that we were going to cross back into the States. So we walked from the hotel up, there was about 130 of us that year, and we had little banners and so on. We came up to the border station and we said, "We've been to Cuba, we've been to Cuba." And literally, honestly, the head of the border, on the U.S. side of the border control, he came out to welcome us and said he would expedite us through the process.
I love it.
So they didn't want to make a media. We wanted some attention and some media out of it. They wouldn't give us any because they know.
Yeah,
So
I love it.
it's just nuts of stuff. But,
I love it.
Could you, I missed what you said though, why would they not give the group a hard time?
because they knew that if it ever got into a serious court action, the U.S. government would have a very weak case.
I imagine too, they were trying to avoid publicity,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
because they would not look good.
But why would they have a weak case? See, I'm just,
Because I think legally it would be a question of what type of solid constitutional ground is the U.S. government on to say that you as a citizen cannot travel to an island nation 90 miles off our shore, that we're not at war with them, there's no hostilities or anything, it's just sheer meanness. Literally.
Those communists, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we have trade relations and full diplomatic relations with China and Vietnam and the whole bit. But it's just that they put our, they stood up to us and they won. Because we've always wanted Cuba and all that.
well, another piece of this that Herb knows more about, I don't know much at all, is the School of the Americas. Do you want to talk a little bit about where that is now and what it was?
You mean the School of the Americas, or
And
the School of the Americas
Fort
Watch?
Benning.
or
Well,
both?
Fort Benning, Georgia,
Yeah, no,
we
I
were
go,
training-
we went every year for years.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's-
Sherman and I went one
yeah.
year.
It's the school where our tax dollars train Latin American military leadership. And Father Roy Bourgeois,
Mhm.
God bless him,
Mhm.
he started with just a few people, 20-some years ago, and now thousands of us are going. But they moved it now from Fort Benning over to the border in Texas. This last year, they gathered in Texas, and,
Okay,
pardon?
yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
happening this weekend, actually.
Pardon?
It's happening this weekend, the demonstrations.
Are the demonstrations at the Texas site
Yes,
or at Fort Benning?
The one at the border already happened.
happened, and they're gonna have
But
another
they're
one
gonna,
now.
they're gonna
Still
do the one
gonna
at
have
Fort
the one,
Benning.
Yeah, this weekend, it's the one at
So
Fort Benning,
there's
they've
two
come
now.
back.
It's always the end of,
Ah.
it's the anniversary of the,
So it's the weekend before Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
I think it might be the Jesuits that were murdered in.
Yeah.
It was,
Salvador.
it is,
I
it
think
is,
that's
20.
the anniversary that they always have it on.
that's what it is.
When the Arena Party in El Salvador killed the Jesuits, who were sort of the
Yes.
intellectual basis of the revolution with FML,
Yeah,
but that's when they have it.
yeah. And Father Roy was a Jesuit, he then
Yeah,
left the
yeah.
order because he married,
It has a heavy Catholic base.
yeah.
I know that a couple of years
But-
ago we went, a lot of buses from like St. Louis University and St. Louis, and a lot of Catholic colleges were very involved.
But on that final day, you should go to it if you ever have a chance, because
It's very moving.
carry a cross with a name of a person on it that our tax dollars have killed over the years. And there are just thousands of crosses being carried. And then we put them on the fence at Fort Benning, because the final event of the weekend is a program that's right there at the fence of Fort Benning. And Father Roy is a very special man, and they have singers and speakers, and carrying that cross with all ages, children to seniors, that our tax dollars have killed.
Well, I went the same year Martin Sheen was there, and I anguished about crossing the line. In other words, you're okay here, but if you step across there, you're violating government property and subject to arrest and jail. So they would probably arrest the leaders, like someone like Martin Sheen or somebody that, it was obviously, he wants the publicity. But my point is, so here I finally said, I'm going across the line. I don't care what happens.
All right.
And so many people went across the line. They couldn't arrest that many people. This is not civil nonviolence. This is nonviolence working in action. In other words, it was 100 people that had buses, and they have a system. You go downtown. It's nothing. But so many people crossed the line that it was just a marvelous feeling that I was kind of pled down in a way.
Well, now Father Roy and you go over the fence.
Yes.
There's no lining where they go over the fence.
It was a wonderful experience. I have to say.
Yeah,
6 months
subsequent to that, when
Yeah.
it was wide open, the gate, they put a big fence up.
Yeah.
And so you can go around the ends of the fence, and a few people do, but if you go in now, you're pretty much guaranteed 6 months.
Yeah.
Yes.
Have you been, Joan?
I've been, I haven't gone over the fence.
I just want to say something quick. I think we glossed over, which is important. I think the mention of Catholics and Catholicism, liberation theology is when Catholic priests took the gospel that Jesus preached about the poor and took it in the streets, and the people sitting in the pew said, "Hey, that's me." In other words, you should be. So, like, they were for unions, they were things, so they were targeted. That's what many priests.
Oh, gosh.
Nuns, that's the three.
Well, the
nuns.
two in Nicaragua that were in the government, they
Right.
were.
And so it was a movement within the Catholic
Oh,
Church,
yeah.
which was not welcomed at all by
No.
American people.
Catholics or-
Catholics in
Anybody,
America were like
yeah.
radicals. But that was the impetus. Why did they rise up? If I didn't just rise up because somebody came along and manipulated them. It was in the villages and in the people said the priests are right. And the priests, instead of just being with the government, in other words, the Catholic bishops,
Hierarchy,
the
with-
cardinals,
right
were all
with them.
buddy with the dictators. You always see the pictures. In other words, embracing, because it was all. But in reality, these priests, the nuns in particular,
Oh, yes.
brought hope and stuff to people. So
Well, they heard Jesus' call about the poor,
Yes.
and they really lived it. Oh, gosh, they were amazing.
Yes.
And the two cardinal brothers, they were.
And when the Pope visited Nicaragua shortly after the revolution, while he was in the receiving line, he berated the two priests who were in the administration publicly.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
Yes.
Father Ernesto Cardinal tried to kiss the Pope's ring and
Right.
Pope grabbed his hand back.
You're not supposed to be doing that.
Oh, those
What
two
was-
guys, they were amazing. Cardinal, yeah.
Yeah.
Ernesto and
So what would the Pope's criticism have been?
The priests are not supposed to be in politics.
Yes.
A large,
Save their souls. Save their souls.
Yeah,
But don't
yeah,
get
yeah,
involved. You follow. Stick to the spiritual realm. Don't talk
Yeah.
about better wages or health care.
Oh, so you're not talking about the current pope?
No.
You're talking
No,
about
no,
that?
no.
Okay.
In the 80s, the Pope in the 80s, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But Ernesto Cardinal and Fernando, I mean, they were amazing men. And if you ever go, we were lucky on one of our trips that Sister City says we went to the island where Ernesto wrote his book and that had his ministry there. If you ever go to Nicaragua, it's a really special place.
it's interesting that this history, I would guess most U.S. people are very ignorant about. And it might be broader than that. I think we're not very interested in Latin American history. aside from this conflicted history. You know, what do we know about Mexican history, for example? But Central America, I don't know. Maybe you want to say something about that. I think there's like a lack of interest, or what? I don't know.
You mean on the part of the people of this nation, or
Right,
the
and
government?
our schooling, it's probably not in the textbooks.
No, never
It's-
has
No.
Definitely not.
Mm-mm.
Never has been.
Purposeful.
We just want to control the areas so that we can control the resources.
Our colonies.
I mean, that was John Foster Dulles. We're 6% of the world's population, using over 40% of the world's resources to maintain our standard of living, and we got to continue to control them. And that's what our foreign policy is all about. And it's so tragic, and we don't learn that in school either.
Capitalism too. United Fruit
That's what it
Company.
is.
United Fruit Company was like an extension of a government. In other words, that's why we have cheap bananas.
Oh, yeah.
In other words, it's a kind of a thing that they could control what the price of bananas are. They could control how much to pay the people. They could, so there's a lot of vested interest that the people who ruled the countries were all wealthy.
And
The
NAFTA
oligarchy.
and CAFTA are just evil as can be. I mean, we have run people off the land. The big companies go down now and are buying all this land because the people that have been on the land for hundreds of years don't have deeds. And so the companies can go in and just take them on over. And we wonder why so many people are coming up to this nation. There are two basic reasons, friends, and it pains me to my core. That's one, is that people have been forced off their land by the big corporation, thanks to NAFTA and CAFTA. And secondly, the drug trade. Mothers do not want their children in Central America because of the drug trade. And who's running the drug trade? The bank I worked for was caught laundering the money. I used to take people from our church up to inner city Chicago, just south of the northern suburbs. The white guys come in, get their drugs, all decked out in their suits, and go home while the kids on the street get shot.
Which bank is that?
Which one?
Which bank laundered the money?
It was Wachovia, now Wells Fargo. Yeah, and we don't hear about this. I mean, think, why don't we legalize the drugs, tax it to the max for public education, the roads, national forests, VA hospitals? Think of all the money that we could earn and make for the good of our nation. But no, the people at the top, they're doing big. They're doing really big.
They want to run their business.
Exactly.
Even Willie Buckley was in favor of legalizing all of this.
Well, it's being used everywhere. I mean, it's not that it's not being used. And what I'm telling you is the wealthy get theirs. I mean, we saw it with our own eyes. Coming in from the suburbs of Chicago, getting it, going home. My bank, when it was Wachovia, got caught. Well, I mean, it's so tragic to me, and I'm 78, I won't see the day, but anything that you younger souls can do to make it happen would be, I think it would be so wonderful to tax that stuff. I mean, alcohol, aren't some of the drugs not as bad for you as alcohol? I've heard that.
Yeah.
Right.
Have y'all heard
I've
that?
heard that too.
Mhm. Yeah.
Not as addictive.
Before it gets too late, I mentioned that we all kind of know about Plowshare, but I'm not sure if our friend here does. But there are some events coming up I want to mention before I forget. Tomorrow morning, we're going to be marching in the Thanksgiving parade. So feel free to come down for that. We're going to meet at 10 a.m. at Christ Lutheran Church, corner of Brandon and Grandin, and the parade steps off at 11. Then our monthly silent peace vigil is at noon, so you're welcome to come to that, even if you're late. There is another program coming up for Plowshare. It's going to be Wednesday, December 7th, here at the Meetinghouse at 8 o'clock. Some of the Roanoke College students are going to present a program on Amnesty International. It's going to be December 7th at 8 here at the Meetinghouse. Megan O'Neill and some of the other students are going to come over and speak about Amnesty International, and we're also going to do a letter writing party. That's a big thing, is to write letters for political prisoners. Trying to remember. Oh, there's one more. We do an annual youth conference every year. The next one, it's called the Teen Peace Jam. The next one will be in the spring of 2017. So December 3rd at 10 at the Plowshare office, we're going to do the first planning session. So if you know any teens who are interested, it's a conference for teens with workshops and music and food, it's all free. If you know any teens who want to help plan that, encourage them to come to that planning meeting. We pay them $50 for 5 hours work. Any kids from 12 to 19 are welcome to participate, and they would help plan the teen peace jam and co-lead workshops and put up flyers, that sort of thing. So
They can be older than 19 to help.
yeah, anybody can help. Parents, adults, anybody can help. We use as many volunteers as we can. We pay, we call them the youth organizers. We pay them $50 for 5 hours work. So.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Oh, no, we're doing it together, people. Hey, I'm gonna leave these.
That'd be fun.
Yeah, but you have to face 81 going home.
Safe trip home.
Oh, thank you so much. It was
Hopefully it won't be as
horrible.
bad.
Pardon?
Hopefully it won't be as bad.
Oh, it couldn't be
Phyllis
because
Albritton.
ours was
The kids come
the
up.
Virginia Tech students, and then there was an accident. And
Yeah.
it took me over an hour to get,
Yeah,
usually
with
it's
this
40
piece
minutes
since
minimum.
he's one of the founding people.